Welcome to the TTS Early Years podcast. Now, each week we're going to be joined by different educational experts from across the globe who are going to offer exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help us as practitioners unlock all the potential for learning that there is in the early years. So to be first to hear about future episodes and to access all of the follow-up content, including ideas for your own setting, Pinterest, mood boards, and loads more, you can sign up for exclusive access using the link in our podcast description. Welcome back to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast, all about the wonders of outdoor play and forest schools. And again, today I'm joined by McCree and Sarah Lawfull, and we're going to dive straight back into where we left off. And really, what I'd like to chat about a bit, Sarah, is the idea that we do live in kind of an Instagram, Pinterest world, and there is a whole view of forest schools which is just autumn leaves, warm apple juice, snow angels and toffee apples. So, what is the truth about forest schools, and why is the truth more important than that kind of Instagram image that we might see?
Well, that's a cracking question. I think, Alistair, for me, it's those Instagram pictures are often about what adults are enjoying and what adults want to be doing and what they want children to be seen to be doing. Fire is the one we've mentioned already. I question a lot why people are doing fire every week. I think I've seen amazing forest school where they never use fire, where they never use tools.
Okay.
Equally, I've seen forest school where tools are embedded in everything that children are doing. When I'm training people, we talk about making sure the needs and the interests of the children are really core and central to what is happening. And we also talk about how each of us as a forest school practitioner brings our own interests and our own competencies and our own passions. And we'll have other people joining our learning community who bring theirs. So if you're somebody listening to this and you think, I'm not competent, I don't want to do lots of fire stuff, or I really don't feel tools are my thing, I'm not into the bushcraft side, but I really love nature, or I really love creative play, then there's a place within the forest school community for you. I've been training now for a long, long time. I can do adequate tool use and adequate fire lighting, and I know how to be safe enough with the children. I'm not excited by all of that. I can see the value in it, and I will use fire sometimes, and I will use tools sometimes if it's relevant to what the children want and need. Most of the time when I'm leading a session, I'm standing back, I'm observing, I'm listening, and I'm letting nature be the teacher. So we're different as forest school leaders. I think that's really key, that there's not one model, there's not one kind of person who's going to be a forest school leader.
Which I think is an excellent point. And it just makes me think that, like with lots of elements of education, there are threads of forest school practice. And what you want is to kind of weave those threads together. But actually, like with everything else, you will have a preference. And again, as you were saying, it's about having that knowledge around what you can do, but also you play to your strengths. And what's really come across for me in the podcast that we've done is that forest schools is really about positioning children back into nature and getting them to have an awareness of something other than what might be their everyday kind of indoor existence. And that doesn't have to be, although it can be, it doesn't have to be fire making, it doesn't have to be tool use. It can be about being under a canopy of leaves or not, depending on the season, and experiencing all of the magic and the smell and the sensation that goes with that. And that's as much forest schools as lighting a fire.
That's so important.
As long as you're not whittling with potato peel.
Yes, yeah. Well, can I mention that? Because, we got out of the podcast, didn't we, as well as in the podcast. When I did my training, that was very common. We were trained that you use potato peelers before you use knives. What I've loved about the forest school community is, and the forest school qualification, that they're regularly reviewed and we update our practice and we learn new things. And as more and more skilled people have joined the forest school community, we're learning different approaches and better ways of doing things, just as we are in our early years practice anyway. So as the Forest School Association, we have a group of Forest School endorsed trainers, Forest School Association endorsed trainers, and we have all agreed that we do not teach the use of potato peelers for whittling with sticks. We use them to peel carrots.
Peel a carrot.
As a precursor.
And potatoes.
Using a knife.
Why they're not called carrot peelers?
Why aren't they carrot peelers? Indeed, vegetable peelers. But, you know, it's about using and choosing the right tool or the right technique at the right time for the right child, when you've got the right ratios in the right place. It's the same as planting trees. You know, we have to find the right place to plant each tree and choose the right tree for a particular site. And it's the same with tools and techniques and all the approaches we might use at forest school. And that's what the training is about. It's about how do we make those judgments. And I really hope that I'm not teaching the same stuff if I'm still alive in 10 years' time. You know, I won't be still teaching what I'm teaching now, because we've learned more things. Neuroscience is amazing. We're discovering so much about learning all the time. We should be changing our practice as we go.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes the pedagogy and practice is always on catch up with the science, because I think sadly as a profession, we don't get steeped in the current thinking. We have to kind of go on a training course, or we have to read a blog, or, you know, so sometimes we feel like we're a little bit on catch up. So all the things we talk about in kind of neurodivergence and neurodiversity, and how children and adults who've got neurodivergent brains function, a lot of the indoor setup that we've got for education really goes against all of those things that those people need. But actually, again, we'll come back to the point of, because the outdoor space is so versatile and changeable and transient, it means that regardless of what your neurodiversity is, and we're all a little bit neurodiverse from each other, that the outdoor space is or can offer everything you need, as long as you've got a reflective adult, as we've talked about, with a growth mindset, who is observing and almost conducting the space along with Mother Nature, who will do a way better job than any of us could ever do. In terms of any experience you've had, Mel, in terms of working with practitioners who are just beginning this kind of foray into forest schools, have you got any bits of advice or any recommendations for where they could look to how they can get started without thinking they have to be the fire starter, the whittler, the den builder?
Oh yeah, I like what Lucy Tiplady says in a recent research paper about forest school, that she's titled it that where children take what they need, which I think goes the same for practitioners as well. And I loved what Sarah said, that there's, you know, I really appreciate that diversity within the forest school community in the different ways. You know, one forest school is not the same as the other, the same as one setting is different to another. And I think when you're starting out, one really important practical point is to be friends with mud. Like, it's and the weather, you know, mud is such a versatile resource, but there's a lot of different ways that we can think about how it impacts on forest school. But one is just in a health way. So I think I learned, I'm not very good with numbers, but a little teaspoon of mud, there's more bacteria in that teaspoon of mud than there is in people in the world, like, which just reached 8 billion. There's a lot of bacteria. So mud, we really need it. And so the so-called hygiene hypothesis got busted as a myth, in terms of we know that we need this extra bacteria for our microbiomes, which is alongside neurodiversity, and perhaps in a handy parallel, we're learning about the microbial biodiversity that we need. And that's really important. So mud is our friend, but it also it's something you have to manage in forest schools. So we can think about the site, and mud is a good indicator of whether you're overusing your site, whether it's been heavily impacted. So thinking about how, when we're caring for the site as well, how you're managing the impact of all those feet on the ground, in terms of habitats and what choices you might have, but also in terms of being friends with the rest of your team. If you're working outside and you're in a setting where they don't like mud, that can cause a lot of conflict. So I was recently in Finland, which we know is heralded as one of the greatest places for your education, but they have a big cultural no-no about shoes indoors, which we don't have here. And children are sent to settings with like indoor slippers, and that's because we are learning all the time and learning from other cultures. That's a great thing, isn't it, that we can hope that in the future we might have a better way of dealing with all the wellies and the gear. And when I first started doing forest schools, I made the mistake of taking the suits home and washing them myself, which is something which make your life easier. It's a lot of washing. So, and then running a team where we were doing the same, the washing machine was always on in the office. So, it's good to think about the real practicalities of how can you share that work as well, so that your participants are warm and dry and safe, but you're also sharing out that work. And if you have got a deficit of useful all-in-one suits, then put the shout out and get some help. Like, luckily these days Lidl and Aldi do really great kit for that, which is really affordable. And now, because of the whole output of austerity, we're getting a bit more aware of the need to share. So we're seeing more uniform swap shops and things like that appearing. So put the shout out and get lots of kit, and then you can rotate the kit as well. So some really sort of practical tips there, I think, about stuff. And one last thing about being prepared and lesson planning. The good thing about forest school is practitioners are often pride themselves on being ready for anything, to chuck the lesson plan, if they've got one, away and follow the interests of the child. But that often means you've got a lot of gear. So thinking carefully about how you pack and use your gear and how you carry it, and how accessible, which bits are accessible to the children. Those sort of things are really important. Forest school practitioners often pride themselves on doing it in a wheelbarrow. Can they get all of their stuff onto site in that way? And it's a big thing if all your resources are indoors. Like, how do you make that transition? Yeah. How do you make that easy? So free flow for yourself as a practitioner, as well as free flow for children.
I think that's really important, and we've talked in previous episodes about that. Your forest school journey can start small, and it can start with an environment walk, and then it can end up in a destination in a space, and that can develop over time with practice. But you're dead right in that if you go all out for forest schools and you have a real belief that you want to do it, but you don't do the prep around who's going to wash the kit, where are you going to store the muddy resources, how are you going to get them clean, then the adults who are concerned with that will very soon become disillusioned with it, because you're suddenly creating a huge amount of workload at the other end. So some careful thinking, but also the information that is produced that's already out there, and some of the stuff that Sarah's organisation produces, gives you lots and lots of information about exactly that. And the idea of joining a forest schools community, of which there are many, where you can have practical discussions with people and say, what do you do about wellies? Or my cleaner goes mad, or how do you store, or how do you get your waterproofs dry? And people have got ingenious solutions for how they do those things, because they've been doing it for a while. So I would say, before you start, steep yourself in those communities and just hoover up as many tips as you possibly can, but don't feel like you've got to be Bear Grylls and get out there and do the whole experience. Let your forest school practice grow.
Definitely.
Is that fair enough, Sarah?
Yeah, very much so. And the other thing I'm saying to people a lot of the time is, as adults, we are often doing things for children that children could do for themselves, and we are disempowering them all the time. So I would recommend, it took me a long time to learn this. When I started out in teaching, I wanted to be all things to everybody and be fabulous at everything. actually asking the children for help, asking them, how can we get the stuff to Forest School? How can we clean it? Engaging them in that process, and engaging the parents and the families and colleagues. And we talk about a community of learning, and then we sometimes forget that actually every time we martyr ourselves dealing with everything, we're reducing the learning opportunities for everybody else and the buy-in opportunities for everybody else. I think there are gender issues around this, which are interesting to have a discussion about. But the wonderful thing about Forest School is it offers children an opportunity to carry heavy things, to be responsible, to pull a trolley, to carry water, to collect resources and put them in a bag and carry them to Forest School, and then check that they're there when we go back again. I've seen really young children be hugely competent around all of this, taking responsibility. And yet somehow we end up as Forest School leaders doing everything for them. And then this ridiculous situation where you've got all the adults running around like headless chickens, meeting the needs of the children as they sit down for their snack, instead of it being actually, this is all of us together. Let's create something yummy together. Let's look after each other, wash our hands, take really good care, proper hand washing with real running water and soap, and the children making sure that their friends' hands are clean and that the snack is served, and children serving snacks and refreshments to adults, making sure the adults join in and sit down, and it's not all these adults hovering over the children, supplying them with refreshments as if we're their servants. I mean, it's mad. It's madness. I've done it. I've been there. How do we create a community where, back to that question about what's the role of the adult and the child, we sit round in a circle because that takes away, I'm in charge and I'm standing up in front of you and I've got all the power. We're actually saying, here we have equality and community, and we're building relationships. And you only get that when you are prepared to be vulnerable and not be in charge all the time.
Which I think is exactly right, and also equally difficult, because I think often as teachers and practitioners, we're trained to be in charge, we're trained to get control, we're trained to engender compliance in children. And actually, when you take it outside of that kind of closed indoor environment, that's when you can be a little bit more vulnerable, and also accept that it's not about being the teacher and the learner. It's about being a community of learners where we will learn equally as much about the children as they do about the environment, if we're prepared to do that thing of watching, listening, and feeling that stretch and that discomfort. Now, again, amazingly, we are at the end of our episode. Literally so much more we could have said. I'm going to ask you both that really annoying thing that people do, where I've said, if you had to sum it up in one reasonably short phrase, in terms of, why do you just love the Forest Schools initiative? What would you say, Sarah?
Wow, that's a hard one. I love that Forest School is a place for belonging and for connection and for taking responsibility and really engaging in understanding who humans are as part of the natural world, that we are nature. I think I'll stop there because I could keep going a lot.
That was an excellent answer. So go on, Mel.
Mine's quite similar, actually. It's about building community as well. And often you hear people say, let's care for ourselves, each other, and the world. It's a handy short phrase that a lot of practitioners use, and that's what we're doing in Forest School. And that we need that right now in the world. We need more care, and most early years practitioners will know the value of care too. It's what we need to get by. It's what we're going to need a lot more of in order to face what comes. So if we can continue to put in positively to building that community of care, then that's a great thing.
I think you're right. And I think for me, again, there's loads of things I could talk about, but I think it just gives us as adults who live in a very busy world, who are often in a position of care and responsibility for children, the outdoors gives you permission just to stop, take a breath, and just be. And I think we all need to do more of that. Just to keep our sanity. All that remains for me to say is Sarah Lawfull and Mel McCree, thank you for taking part in this TTS Talking Early Years podcast.
Oh.
Thank you both very
It's
much.
been an absolute pleasure, and I hope it's just as good to listen to.
Yeah, thank you both. That was really interesting and always exciting to talk about forest school with Mel.
I just want to say a massive thank you to our guests today, Mel and Sarah, for joining us and providing such brilliant and invaluable insights. So you've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and with Mel McCree and Sarah Lawfull. So if you've been inspired by our conversation today, then don't forget you can sign up via the link in the episode notes, and that will mean you're the first to hear about future episodes, but also you'll get access to some exclusive follow-up content that will include things like ideas for your setting, but also some Pinterest boards that will help you to shop for forest school resources.